Pull up your,
I'll start recording. I may trim some of them, but it's 5:31, December 3, class 5 of the Sunday night giving a university class.
Sweet. I made some slides that I could present. I just kind of made them like last minute, but just will keep me organized if that's okay. Can I share
sure.
screen?
Do you have the screen share ability, or do we need to pass it off?
Check. Let's check here.
You haven't
There's so many buttons they added to Zoom here. All right, cool. I'm gonna go ahead and share. Present. Okay, can everyone see that?
Yes, we can.
Awesome. Okay.
I like it when we ask questions, nobody says anything. But yes,
I can still see you guys, which helps. The thumbs up is good. Okay. Well, I guess I'll kick us off. My grant proposal is for an organization called Cross Purpose, which some of you may be familiar with in Denver, Colorado. Their mission is to abolish relational, economic, and spiritual poverty through career and community development. I really like this mission statement. It really speaks to the areas that they target most. And I like that it speaks to not just economic poverty, which is what we think of when we think of poverty, which is people living with a low income. And but it also speaks to relational and spiritual poverty, which goes hand in hand oftentimes with the economic poverty. So a quick overview of their programs. I didn't put all the details on here, but basically Cross Purpose is a workforce development program where they take people living below the poverty line and put them through course where they learn job skills in different areas that include like construction, administration, like plumbing, medical assistant, pharmacy, all of these different career tracks that they can choose from. And that's all part of this second number 2 on here, the leader program. So they call the people going through the program leaders because they're leading themselves in this workforce development. And then that's kind of the central meat and bones to Cross Purpose. And they also have the launch program, which is kind of like a mini version of the leader program online, available to people who can't do the leader program. So the leader program is a 6-month program, and it's completely free and paid for. It's half days. So they go from like 9 a.m. to 2 p.m. or so. So a lot of them will still have be able to have side jobs and then not incur like the debt that comes along with going to like a community college or something like that. And then the legacy program is just their alumni program. So they really want to support the people who go through the leader program in continuing to just give them the support they need to maintain those jobs that they get from the program. This is my 990 analysis. They did score a 16 out of 18. Interestingly enough, and Dan had mentioned this before, Cross Purpose, really great organization, doesn't have a perfect score. The 2 areas they're low in is the 2 bottom lines. How much their expenses are overhead, and then how much their expenses are fundraising. And looking at the I didn't have my sheet in front. Can you go grab my sheet? Yeah, thank you. But looking at their actual numbers, most of their revenue or income comes from donations, like 95% or something. I wrote it in my sheet. And so it would make sense that they dedicate a lot of time and resources to fundraising and to management in order to properly steward those funds. So yeah, 98% of their funding comes from contributions and grants. So I think that kind of justifies the docking of 2 points there in their analysis. And just to speak a little more to the impact. So specifically, I pulled some statistics from the LEADER program, and this is from 2022. But they had 137 graduates, 77% of graduates reported job retention 6 months after graduation. And they list the industries they train in: medical, trades, culinary, IT tech, administrative, CDL, which I mentioned some of those, but the average hourly wage is $20 an hour, and monthly wage before this was really interesting. The monthly wage before starting the program was $541, and then the average monthly wage after graduating is $3,280, which is pretty incredible. And then total 343 people out of poverty, so that includes their families as well, and 506% average wage increase. I think these statistics speak to some of the impact of this program. And what's really cool about this organization and why I chose this organization is I've gotten, with the nonprofit I work for right now, we get to go to Cross Purpose and teach some classes there. So I've gotten to kind of volunteer, so to speak, and have interactions with the leaders and participate in the spiritual development side of things. So if you recall, there was economic, relational, and spiritual development. And I actually participate in the relationship development, teaching a healthy romantic relationships class, and the spiritual development side of things. And so I've really seen it firsthand, and I see the transformation that people experience, and it's not just about the job training. In that second paragraph there, I basically talked to, while the core issue of poverty is lack of job training and development, the heart issue is a lack of love and support. And so I think that's what really makes this program successful, is it supports the leaders in more than just job training. It's just life training. And many of the people going through this program have significant trauma. Keem, you mentioned we're talking about trauma today, and that's definitely one of my passions when it comes to organizations I care about supporting, is supporting people walking out of just difficult life circumstances. And I'm definitely really fascinated with just hearing people's stories. And that's been the coolest part about being involved with Cross Purpose, is hearing people's stories. Pretty crazy, the things that they've experienced and overcome, and how they're fighting for ground in their life in all areas. And like, I think it's just a really effective solution to helping people out of poverty, is helping them as the whole person, not just their job development, but who they are holistically. So I think that's it. I think I spoke to kind of everything on this sheet. And yeah, I would just open it up, I guess, to any questions.
Awesome. Well done.
Somebody
And-
chatted on here that they were glad they didn't have to follow you because you did such a nice job.
Alec gets to
I am not excited to follow that, but it's okay.
You're very good.
Thank you.
What
It helps
size
having
organization
experience.
are they? Like, what is their total revenue?
I think it was around 3 million. No, maybe more. I don't recall. It's pretty big, and they have two, actually, let me just, I don't know if I have their 990 pulled up actually, but they have, I'll stop sharing screen, see if I can pull it up. They have two campuses, and they're actually building two more. Well, one is already built and opening in 2024 in January, and then the other one they just broke ground for. So they're expanding pretty quickly. It's cool.
Good job. Anyone else have any questions? We like class participation, so 1 or 2 questions are great.
Have you gone to one of their graduations?
I have not yet.
Okay. I'm pretty friendly with Cross Purpose, so one of my goals probably next year is to go to one of the graduations. I think it'd be really fun.
Yeah, I've heard really good things about it. I almost had the opportunity to go, but I was out of town. But yeah, they're graduate. I've seen pictures. It just looks like a really exciting and really exciting event, and cool opportunity to hear some personal stories from people.
Okay, no questions? You sure? Nobody wants to ask if she wants to share her presentation slides so you can use it as a template?
I was curious, and if you addressed this, I apologize. I might have missed it. How did you hear about the organization?
So I work for a nonprofit right now, who works with Cross Purpose, and teaches some classes there. And the who I work with, he used to work at Cross Purpose. And then a lot of people from our church also worked or were a part of the organization. And I just looked, Keeman, the annual budget is around 7 million.
Great. All right, good job. Mr. Slauson, you're up.
All right.
Do you have slides as well, or would you like me to share your packet?
No, I did not make any slides, unfortunately, but
And just so everyone knows, that's not a requirement. It certainly is nice, but don't feel any pressure if you aren't planning on doing that. That's okay. So let me pull up yours. But go ahead and get started while I pull up your sheet.
should be all right. Yeah, so I similarly to Cross Purpose, I chose a organization called Habitat for Humanity of the Denver metro area. So it's actually a really huge organization, and I think there's different branches across the country, not only the Denver one, but it stuck out to me because that's a place I volunteered with before. And what they do is they have a lot of programs for developing people that are below, I believe, 80% of the top earners in the country. So if they're in the bottom 80%, it's the bottom 20% of like revenue makers in the country. They offer them programs to learn how to maintain, own a home, and financial responsibility. They have a lot of other classes that they do. I think conflict resolution, mortgage, and estate planning, and it goes on and on. But they basically educate families, and then they provide them the opportunity to work on their own home. And a bunch of volunteers get together. So my experience was basically they have these contractors in this, they kind of buy out a neighborhood and they contract people to start building homes there. And they just bring a bunch of people together and they all work on, building homes. And people get to spend, upwards of like 120 hours working on their own home. So a couple weeks, and then they have a lot of courses that they do to prepare themselves. And then they get to the opportunity to buy the home at a lower rate and a more affordable rate. So yeah, that's kind of their goal. And yeah, I see the 990 is pulled up, and they did score an 18. So yeah, they are fiscally responsible, and uh, yeah, I think they just offer one thing that I thought was cool, a cool stat is they had 95,000 hours of from volunteers in the year 2022, which I think it just kind of goes to show how many people get to participate and help people do this. And that's just kind of touching the surface of what they do. They also have projects for repairing people's homes, as well as like the home ownership programs. So there's just like really a lot of things that they're working and doing. And yeah, I think it's cool that they tie in education to everything that they're doing. It's not just like, hey, here's this home, figure it out. They're like, hey, we're going to show you how the process of building it works. We're going to show you how you can maintain it. We're going to show you how like everything in between, which I think is just really important. So yeah, I think that kind of touches on most of everything. And yeah, I saw what was interesting too. In the last like 3 years, they went from a revenue of like 20 million to 50 million. So they've just been growing really significantly. And yeah, 30% of that, 34% of that is from individuals, 30% from companies. So actually, the first time I heard about it was my mom's company. She got together like 50 of the people that work there, and they all went out together and volunteered for 2 days, 8-hour days, and made a significant contribution to Habitat as well. So yeah, I think I can open it up to any
Look, they
questions.
have their program and administration fundraising expenses right there.
Yeah.
So do they do home repairs too?
Mhm.
That's cool.
Yeah.
All right, any questions? Follow-up, feedback?
This is more of a comment than a question, but I love Habitat. I've volunteered with them for a really long time. And as you were talking just about how they have the recipients be part of the home and learning how to do stuff, also as volunteers, it's really cool. Like I've learned to do baseboards and firewall and stuff that I would normally obviously not know how to do. And so it's pretty cool. I love their kind of collaborativeness of, you know, the folks again who are the recipients, but also the folks who are involved in supporting in some way kind of get to do it together, which is really awesome. So, and I think I'm surprised by the number you just said of revenue, but also not, just because I think, especially in Metro Denver, we're just seeing like housing be such, right? Like it's such a hot topic that I think folks are getting more involved with just trying to support getting people into homes. So anyway, just love Habitat. So
Yeah. And I think you touched on something I forgot, but just like it was my experience working and volunteering there was like really humbling, because how many people get to say they've worked on their own home that they lived in? I mean, that's not something in the current times people really get to do, or I think it's really cool when you do, because yeah, you get to learn so much about, you know, what it means. You know, we have these privileges in America where for a lot of people housing is just expected, but a lot of people work really, really hard to barely get into anything. So the opportunity to just provide affordable housing, I think, is really cool and special. So
Can I ask you a quick question? This is Brent with the Pillsbury family. First of all, great presentations from both of you, and those were both amazing. And I'm just curious, do you live in Denver, or are you able to? So I'm kind of unfamiliar with this process. So if you get approved and if the board says yes, great job, good presentation, are we or you even planning on, so if you award the money, to go help out with the organization directly, or is it just a donation to the ministry or organization?
yeah, I actually in preparing for this, I've kind of come up with a plan to sucker a bunch of my coworkers into volunteering. I want to schedule a couple of different things. Maybe it may take till like next summer, but I definitely like to get involved again. I used to do twice a year, but it's been 2 years. So just kind of in preparation for, you know, coming up with something to do a grant proposal for it, it's definitely remotivated me to get involved. And yeah, and see what that's like. And I think what's cool about it is they give you opportunity to like do a mass amount of people. So I just want to see how many of my coworkers would be willing to get in on it with me. So
So do you live in Denver, or are you?
yeah,
Oh,
I
you do?
live I live just south, like 10 minutes of Denver for like 8 years. And right now I live a little bit further. I'm in Lone Tree, which is like 25 minutes outside of Denver. But I've spent a lot of time in Denver.
That's so cool, because the one I'm thinking about pursuing is building houses for families in Mexico. And I just think a home just really transforms people's lives. And I'm hoping to actually go down there and build it myself with my family, to actually get the money if we get approved, and then go build the home. So
That's amazing.
love it. I need somebody to come to my home. I wish there was someone here. I have all sorts of water leaks, blah, 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 but great presentation. I won't talk anymore.
Debbie
Thank
knows
you,
how to
guys.
do baseboards.
Oh, okay. That'll get my water leak fixed.
Yeah, good job, you guys. Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you.
All right, I actually wanted to go to Brad. Are you ready? Because yours is also related to tonight's topic. You ready, Mr. Black?
I am ready.
Okay, are we gonna be able to see you? We only see your black screen.
Oh, that's no good. I'm sorry. Let's see here.
And I'm pulling up your sheet.
Thanks.
I mean, it's kind of appropriate with your last name, right?
It is. Thank you very much. Let's see. Come on, man. Where is this?
And if you're on your phone and it's too challenging, you can worry about it after your presentation, but it's
This should show me.
we see black.
Dang it. Hold on. These get so non-video. Full screen, side by side, standard. That is weird. Hold on. I mean, yeah, you got to see the face. I understand.
So why don't we do this then? If Debbie's okay with it, let's jump over to Debbie and we'll come back to you.
Sounds good.
That'll give you a little bit of time. So
My technological skills are challenged as well. My teenagers usually figure stuff out for me, but I think I should be good.
that's why we procreate.
Right, basically. Yeah, I mean, I love that kind of the intro's been really about housing and poverty, because that is kind of the nonprofit that I picked focus. So I chose Project I See You. I got involved with this organization because a good friend of mine started it in 2009. However, she started it kind of in the Dominican Republic. It came out of just seeing, she adopted a child from there. They lived there for several years, and it came out of just a desire to help teach folks, specifically women. This ministry is focused on women, basically skills. So making jewelry, starting small businesses that would help them support themselves. So I will say kind of the umbrella is women. It's also women of color. So I actually called her last night because I was like, so I'm looking through all your stuff and like the website isn't like specific about women of color. But that is a big focus. And she basically was like, the umbrella is women, but like specifically in Denver in 2021, they started a kind of a branch off of Project I See You, which is called Shared Power. And it's really around helping women of color start small businesses and or get into first home ownership. And so kind of along the lines of Habitat as well, it's providing $10,000 grants to those individuals who are just needing some extra support, either to keep their business going or to get into a first time home buying situation. Let's see. They've had 40 grants that have been awarded to them since 2021. It kind of came right out of COVID, to be honest. Just the need that she saw for folks really needing to get into housing, but specifically women and women of color. And they've had 60 participants, people who've been awarded. However, each year they've had about 200 applicants. So out of those 200, about 60 people have gotten or received those grants. They have something called captains, which is basically individuals who come in and say, hey, I'm willing to say I'm going to try to raise $10,000 or I will raise $10,000 to help support one woman. So it's kind of like a sponsorship in some kind of sense to say, hey, we're going to come in and raise this money to help support a mom or a woman that is trying to keep her business going or get into a new home. What else? That's all I got. What are questions? I know that's not very exhaustive, but I'm not a detail person. I'm like here's the overarching kind of what they do. Why it's important to me, similar to what I was saying earlier about Habitat, like I live in kind of downtown Reno, Denver, have for about 20 plus years. And I've just seen the housing disparity that's gone on and the homelessness and, you know, all the research that's coming out is really just talking about keeping, not just getting people into permanent housing, but also keeping people in permanent housing. And so I love kind of the idea of that this is one way to fight poverty. It's something that we can do to help facilitate getting people off the streets. So, questions?
What was their score, Debbie? You might have mentioned it.
Oh,
and
sorry.
might
Yeah,
have
no, I
missed it.
didn't. They had an 18. Originally, they had a 16 because one of my analysis sheets had greater than 2 rather than less than 2, which didn't make sense to me. So I emailed Keem and he was like, yeah, no. I was like, okay, that makes more sense. So yeah, they had an 18, which was impressive. So.
Good job. Any questions?
I'll ask a question. Great presentation. Thank you. This is Brent from the Pillsbury
Yeah.
family.
Yeah.
Are you more passionate about the helping with the small business side or the getting homes for people side? Which one are you more passionate about?
I mean, probably both. So I own my own small business. So I love that concept, but also I love housing for selfish reasons of I just love like going into homes and helping people move in and learning skills of how to fix flooding issues, baseboards, whatever. So I don't know if I could pick one. I really like love both. But I would say my bigger passion is probably just women, but also women of color, folks of color, getting them out of poverty and this idea of shared power that as white individuals, we have a level of power that we have a high standard of what's expected of us to help facilitate change. And so that's probably more so for me where I get real passionate.
Do you find, I mean, I'm in California, but do you find I'm a school teacher, so I see a lot of kids and, you know, minorities. And I have this one particular kid in my class that he's African-American, but his mom's Mexican. And his thing is, I will never be successful. Do not see what color I am. Like that's his stance. And so that means the mindset's broken. And no matter how much I talk to him, he's hell bent that this is the way his life's going to go.
Well, I don't know
And
if it's broken. I think that's just that's his reality. It's a reality we haven't experienced, but they do every day. So yeah, hopefully things will continue to change and get better, but we know that that's, you know, incremental.
Good job.
Yeah.
Yeah. All right.
Thanks.
Thank you very much. Let's do one more because I know Carter's working in between his work shift. I know, Brad, you're working again. Well done, my friend. But do you mind holding off and allowing young Mr. Carter to go? Because he's
anything for you, Keem. Anything for you.
Oh, you're so kind. And then after Carter's presentation, we'll jump into our material for the evening. We do have a learning portion tonight as well in between the presentations. And then we have 3 more presentations. We'll do those towards the end of class. That we kind of break it up a little bit. Okay, and Carter, I have the static slides. I apologize, I don't have the presentation because I didn't have that ready. But I can show your static items unless you're somewhere where you can do it.
Oh, I think I can do it now. I switched to a computer, so I should be fine now.
Dan, can you let Carter share, please? And I do have your video pulled up just in case.
Sounds good. And I'll let you know. Thank you.
All right, take it away.
All right. Is that working? Can you see my screen?
It says it started screen sharing, but it's black is all I see.
Let's see.
Loading. There you go.
Starting to do something. Oh, let me go start from the beginning. All right, is that working? Can you see?
Yes, it is.
Okay. So the organization that I chose is called There with Care. And it's basically, it's an organization where their main mission is to help families that are like enduring medical crises. They pretty much help with like the day-to-day tasks with families that are going through medical crises, like going grocery shopping for you, going like taking the kids to school is one of the things I saw. They come in, they'll even like clean your house and stuff like that. And I just, for me, I had a family member that had a medical crisis, and I just remember like day-to-day stuff and how hard it could be to just complete like regular tasks and responsibilities when you're trying to put all this energy into helping this person. And so definitely hit home for me on this one. I have their mission statement there. I guess I could read it off there. There with Care's mission is to provide a wide range of meaningful and fundamental services to children and families during the critical phase of a medical crisis. They serve families referred by medical agencies by building a network of services and people who ease the burden of life's day-to-day obligations with compassion and care. They strive to foster a caring and equitable environment that embraces meaningful services, inclusivity, and respect. And then, oh, too far. I guess I kind of already said this, but yeah, just definitely hits home. Definitely, I think it's something that helps you focus fully on whoever's in your family that's struggling. They definitely do a good job at easing that burden and just letting you spend time with them and giving the person in need the necessities that they need. And then I have their impact. So they've served more than 5,000 families. That's over 20,000 people. They've received 6 million in donated in-kind items from the community. They've received about 5 million in donated volunteer and professional service hours. Their average patient age is 5. 30% of families have single parents. They have, it costs about $4,126 to serve a family through this crisis. 122 average days a family receives the care from There with Care. They've served 720 families in 2020 and 991 in 2021. They served 83 families in 2021 with their children 200. What is that? 83 families served in 2021 facing critical mental illness with their children, 200 average number of families served daily. And then they have 85% of families who were served lived below 300% on the federal poverty level. And then I had a little video. Let's see if it'll play.
Carter, before you start sharing, there's a little box that you have to click in order to share sound as well.
Oh, okay.
Once you X out of that.
There's a box that I have to share for sound as well, as you said?
Yeah, stop sharing. Stop sharing completely. So end your share down, go down to the green, there you go. Now share again. When it selects the screen with the video towards the bottom of that little box, there are.
Oh, I see. There we go.
I wish I could get all of them in a room and thank all the donors, the staff, the volunteers, and all the people in the community that just make it work. They're being the friend, and they're being that community that we need so badly.
There with Care is a godsend to me. Just knowing that they care about you and they're thinking about you and giving you encouragement is amazing.
All the donors, all the volunteers, they're angels because they made me feel like strong and secure, like confidence. They're family.
They've been there for me the whole way, for us, the whole way for my kids. I can count on them, and we thank you for that.
Thank you for giving this to us because this is exactly what we needed.
right. Can you hear me now? Am I good?
Yes.
So on their 990 analysis, they scored an 18. I believe their total revenue was about, I think it was about 4 million. Yeah, I think 4,400,000 was their total revenue. And yeah, that's about all I got.
Good job. Well done. I love even though it's it takes a bit of time to gather kind of those specific numbers that you got. I assume they had those somewhere where you could kind of pull them either from an annual report or on their website or something. But
Yeah.
that is so helpful when we're reviewing organizations to really see how many people are they helping, on what basis, and how much does that cost. So even the fact that they said it's about $4,000 something to help one family go through their crisis, then you know exactly, like if you are able to provide a $1,000 grant, you have a good idea of how that is having a direct impact. And
Yeah,
that's part of why we go through this process. So I loved seeing those numbers there. So thank you for that. Any questions from anyone?
I do actually. And Carter, if you don't have an answer, it's totally okay.
I'll try my
But
best.
I'm just curious how, because I work in a hospital system, like how folks find out about this. So like, say you see a family, like now I know about this organization, but how do they kind of market? I don't know if that's the right word. How do they get the word out that, hey, this is a service or a support that is available to folks?
I don't know specifically. I saw on their website that it said some specific hospitals or like whatever your crisis may be. Some of them refer you directly to the There With Care. It had it on its website. I would have to double check, but it says like I think it's mainly in the Boulder area that they have like a couple places that they like a couple hospitals around and a couple doctors' offices that refer straight to the building. Yeah.
That's a really good question, Debbie. Thank you.
Sure.
Go ahead.
Do the people, good presentation, Carter. Really
Thank you.
appreciate hearing about that organization. And I was just wondering if the people who participate, do they have to like apply or go through a process at all? Do you know, or is it just interested?
So they take in. It looked like on their website they took in mostly volunteers. There is an application process, but there's like, I'm pretty sure there was like 2 people in charge of like interviewing and then kind of training, so to say, these volunteers on like what they're going to be doing and stuff like that. But yeah.
What about like the people receiving the care? Like, did they go through a process of?
That I don't know. I would have to check. I'm not too sure. Yeah, that I'm not too sure.
You had a question too?
No.
Oh, did I ask you a question? Oh, okay. Well, excellent presentation.
Thank you.
All right, awesome. Oh, sorry. Kwame, you had a question?
Yes, thank
Go
you.
ahead.
Carter, one thing I really liked about your presentation was that you included a video. I really liked hearing like their personal stories and their experiences with your program. And I was wondering, have you had any medical crises experiences yourself?
I personally haven't. It was my mom was the one that had the medical crisis, and so I was the one like involved with the caregiving aspect. And I just remember like struggling to do like grocery shopping or cleaning the house while trying to take care of somebody that can't fully take care of themselves. Yeah.
That's so sweet. Thank you.
Yeah.
Okay, very good.
All right.
So
Well,
Carter,
thank you.
thank you for working that out with your workers so that you could do that. We appreciate hearing from you. Okay, so if you would please stop sharing, and then I will jump over And I also loved how you guys are also supportive of each other. You guys are so kind. You're like, good presentation. But yes, it's never easy to go first. So I appreciate all of you who did so willingly today. And hopefully everyone now sees it's, oh, that's not what we want, sorry. That it's low pressure. We want to hear about where your passions are and what organizations you have found that are in line with those passions and learn about them. And Given University loves learning about new organizations. That's part of why they want more people involved in these classes and participating, is so that we can learn about more organizations as well. Okay, let's try this again. See if, there we go. You guys all see my screen okay? Give me a thumbs up if you're seeing what you're supposed to be seeing this time. Very good. Is it large enough? Do I need to get any bigger?
It's
Great.
large enough.
Perfect, thank you. So as I mentioned at the onset of class, we are going to be looking at homelessness and trauma. And Alex, I always have to remember which one is which between you guys, no offense. But Alex mentioned that financial poverty isn't the only kind of poverty that we have in our country and that we see in the world. And that's a little bit of what we are going to touch on tonight. And we call it societal and mental poverty. So we're going to not so much look at, we're going to look a little bit at some of the causes and then what are some of the responses that might be appropriate. So first I want to start with a question. And the question is trauma the same as anxiety or stress? I'm sure you've heard of people say, oh my goodness, that was traumatic, or oh, I'm so triggered, or I'm feeling anxious in this situation. So is trauma the same as anxiety or stress? What do you guys think? One or two brave souls willing to speak up on this? Debbie, you're the resident expert, so what do you think?
I know, but I've talked a lot. I feel like someone else should talk. But I'll just say a quick, no, I don't. I think that anxiety and stress is a normal thing that happens to humans daily or weekly or monthly or whatever. Trauma is something significantly different that leaves impacts that cause it to be difficult for folks to move on.
Very well said. Yeah, and actually we have this video that I would like to share, but it's a little bit long, so I'm not going to share the whole thing, but it speaks to exactly what you are saying, Debbie. And what I'll do is I'll put this link in the email so that you all can watch it later. It is worth watching. It's about 7 minutes long, and I'll let you do that later. I'm just going to play the first part of it, and then I'll stop it kind of abruptly, so don't let that bother you, but give me a thumbs up once it starts.
The most important thing to know is that there's a difference between trauma and stress. As I like to say to people, life sucks a good amount of the time. We all have jobs and situations that are really unpleasant. But the moment that situation is over, it's over. The problem with trauma is that when it's over, your body continues to relive it. My name is Bessel van der Kolk. I'm a psychiatrist, neuroscientist, and author of the book, The Body Keeps the Score.
So I'll pause it right there, but he's kind of saying the same thing that Debbie just mentioned, that stress and anxiety, he says, life sucks on a daily basis, but trauma is something that not only your brain keeps score of, but even your physical body actually retains that experience and the emotion and trauma surrounding the experience. So trauma really can have a very strong reality, and that is that it leaves a lasting impact. And he goes into this more in the video. It's about 7 minutes long, as I said, and it is quite interesting to kind of hear the science behind it, and he's pretty authoritative on the subject. And what he says is trauma leaves a lasting impact on the brain. It is psychological. It's not strictly an emotional issue, and that's why it's not the same as anxiety. And persons who have experienced trauma can often be triggered, and that is a word that we hear all the time in our culture, But when someone who has experienced trauma is triggered, it can cause them to almost be re-traumatized, or in effect be re-traumatized in a situation that might seem harmless or everyday to other people. And if they hide it really well, or if we're not aware of it, then we just kind of go on our way and we're not really aware of what's happening around us. Or if we're the person who's being re-traumatized, we might feel like nobody's aware of what's happening within ourselves, and we're trying to kind of behave normally with our family or with friends or at work, and it can be really challenging. And studies have found that even early childhood trauma can have a lifelong effect. So even if you just celebrated a birthday like Dan and you're 39 like Dan, if you had early childhood trauma, you can still be living with those effects even at a later stage in life. And what those early childhood trauma are called is adverse childhood experiences, or ACEs, adverse childhood experiences. And the fact is that most individuals have had some form of adverse childhood experience to a certain extent. And even if they've only had those experiences to a certain extent, they might still be affected to a considerable extent, because the effect can be much larger and longer lasting than the experience itself. Because, as the professor said in the video, your body keeps score. Your body retains that emotion and the experience of it, and it becomes a psychological trauma. There was a certain set of early childhood traumas, the ACEs, that were studied over a 30-year period. They took a set of circumstances and looked at a group of people over a 30-year period and kind of tracked the effects of those experiences from their childhood. And the results were just staggering in terms of what they found with those and how long it continued to affect them. So we're going to do a quick personal exercise, because often we aren't necessarily aware of some experiences that might actually be adverse childhood experiences in our own life or for people around us. So we're going to do a personal experience. It can be a little bit triggering, so don't feel like you have to participate, and I'm not going to ask you to put your results in the chat or anything like that. We'll just do it individually. But it's 10 questions, and for each question where you can respond yes, just use your fingers. There's 10 questions. Hopefully you all still have your 10 fingers, and just put them on the table and do one finger for each yes response. Okay, so the first question: as a child, in your childhood, was a family member incarcerated? So if you can respond yes to that, just use one finger. Next question: was a family member an alcoholic or a drug abuser? Or was someone in your family mentally ill, or did they attempt suicide? Number 4, did you experience the loss of a parent, either through death or through divorce? Did you experience loss of a parent through divorce, or perhaps through an adoption or fostering situation? Was a parent physically abused by their partner when you were growing up in your home, or were you frequently or often physically abused? Were you often humiliated or insulted by a parent? Or were you touched sexually by someone who was 5 years or older than yourself? Did you often go hungry or have to wear dirty clothes? Or did you frequently feel that no one in your house thought you were important, resulting in emotional neglect? So those are the 10 questions, and just be aware for yourself of how many you said yes to. So that would be your ACEs score, your ACE score. And now let's look at, based on the responses and how people score, how that might have some effect. Of the people that they studied over those 30 years, only 36% had scored a 0, or could say no to all 10 of those. And that's 1/3 of the population, basically. A full quarter had at least one of those experiences and had 1 point. And 16% typically score 2 points. 10% of respondents usually score 3 points, And 1 in 8 people score at least 4 points. That's 12%. So that's quite a large number if you think 1 in 8 people. You know, we have about 24 people on this class. So just by statistics, that would suggest that at least 3 people have experienced adverse childhood experiences and would potentially score 4 or more. So when we transfer this into the real world, what might that mean? And what they found with this study is that individuals who scored 4 or more on the ACEs were 3 times more likely to have a bipolar disorder. And they were 5 times more likely to have chronic depression and 6 times more likely to resort to illicit drug abuse. 10 times more likely to attempt suicide. And the reason that we're bringing this up is because these are experiences that are usually, they're so far in the past once we're adults, and we walk around in our daily life not really sharing with everybody we meet, perhaps what our own personal experience is, and not always offering opportunity to other people to share what their experience may have been as well. And perhaps they're in situations and we don't know, but it could be triggering or re-traumatizing for them, or it might be for ourselves as well. And it's important to be aware and understand that we do need to have more awareness and education and resources to be able to help people who are suffering from the long-term effects of trauma. Now, if we take those kinds of those circumstances and the responses to trauma, what if we put them in the workplace? You know, it's one thing to just kind of be walking around in the grocery store, but what if we are experiencing those type of responses to trauma in the workplace? And using that same ACEs score again, what they found is that people who score 4 or more of those 10 questions, those who score 4 or more, which is pretty low, they're 40% more likely to drop out of school. They're 2 times more likely to be unemployed, and 3 times more likely, if they are employed, to miss work regularly. And even if they're not missing regularly, they're 4 times more likely than other workers to have serious job performance issues. So you can see that someone who has suffered trauma or adverse childhood experiences can really affect them in the workplace. And the reason we're bringing this up is because often loss of a job or inability to keep a job can have a direct correlation to homelessness or to other situations that cause them to be someone who needs additional support or additional help. So really what we want to say here is it's important, even in the workplace, like Carter, I know you're at work right now, and whether we are an employee ourselves, just be the awareness of our colleagues, but even especially if you can be in a supervisory role or have opportunity to supervise under individuals, it's important to have an understanding and compassion of what they might be dealing with, and at least take the time to find out what's going on and have an awareness that there could be something that's really deep rooted, and that might be affecting them in the long term. So I'm just going to pause right there. Any questions or reflections on kind of what we've looked at so far? Everybody good? Keep going.
I have
Go
a
ahead,
question.
Bonnie.
This is interesting. I think of these trauma issues as an American, and sometimes I put myself in the shoes of someone from another country, you know, where life is so much harder. And I wonder how those numbers would compare to much more challenging situations around the world.
Mm-hmm.
Just out there with my wearing my whiteness right now.
Yeah, that's a good question. Yeah. And I know
not for any particular question or answer, just thinking about it.
Mm-hmm. And that's a good way to begin thinking about these kinds of subjects, because then you'll have a curiosity, and it might cause you to ask more questions or read some articles or something along those lines. So that's a great train of thought. And yeah, I know you were in education too, Bonnie, I believe, if I remember correctly. And Brad is saying that on average, students in his classroom would have scored pretty high on those 10 questions, meaning that they would be more subject to some type of behavioral issues probably, or lack of focus, or some other things like that. So it is something that we see pretty frequently. Now, if we kind of shift this and say, so now that we've learned just a teeny tiny bit about adverse childhood experiences and a little bit about what it means just to be walking around as any normal person or to be in the workplace, what about if we tie it to homelessness? And if we look at some of those scoring numbers and tie them to homelessness, you know, we were talking about individuals with score of 4 or more. And right away here, if we see that individuals who score 4 or more on the ACEs scale are 13% more likely to experience homelessness right off the bat. That's pretty significant. And if they score 6 or higher, 27%. Almost 1/3 of those people have experienced homelessness. That's pretty staggering in my mind. So with such a staggering issue, when we really begin to think about what are some of the trauma-related causes that can cause homelessness, do you see where we kind of can start to connect the dots when we talk about connecting from trauma over to homelessness? Does that make some sense? What are your thoughts on that?
Well,
Peter?
I would,
Go ahead, Alec.
sorry, I guess, you know, when I think of some of the traumas that were mentioned, you know, if people are growing up in homes where people are incarcerated or there's abuse taking place, they may not have examples of fiscal responsibility or, you know, not having like those kind of examples for work and like how to maintain those type of things in a healthy way, manage, and that can kind of lead people down to not be able to, you know, afford it or hold stuff down.
Yeah, very true. And interestingly, next week we'll be talking a little bit more about that financial responsibility and managing personal finances. Yeah. Peter, you looked like you were reaching for your mouse. Did you have a comment? And then I see you, Tammy.
Oh, yeah, I was just gonna say, I'm glad you caught that. I don't know how you saw it, but okay.
I'm a mom, I see everything.
I was gonna say, when trauma around you is so just constant, it's hard to find the motivation to continue. So you have certain situations where trauma is just every day. We have these numbers where you clearly address, like there's 1, 2, 3. What happens if those numbers 6 is every day, or 3 or 4 is every day? You learn to just eventually. I see when I was over there in Vietnam, you see some of the kids, they just give up. They don't even care. So, and then they eventually make their way to homelessness. There's no motivation, no drive.
Yeah. And sounds like those kids that you're talking about, they're living in that situation right now. So they're in that early childhood phase of these adverse childhood experiences. And not only is it affecting them right now, it will continue to affect them as they grow up. So it's that long lasting effect, because trauma, they might be able to grow out of it and get out of that situation, but the effects of their childhood trauma will follow them and will continue. Yeah. Tammy?
I was just going to say that, you know, if you're a child growing up in a war zone, you know, or a place that's completely violent, or you're in fear of, you know, being sexually assaulted, you know, the alternative of being away from that, you know, the streets might not look as bad if you're suffering, you know, that reoccurring danger on a daily basis. So yeah, that's what I was
saying. Yeah. Very true.
Kim, could I say something real
yes,
quick?
Please,
ask
Brent.
a question?
Go ahead.
Yeah, I'm a high school teacher. I teach PE and world history, and I see like a lot of these kids come in and we ask them to write and learn, and they just can't. And they've got and like, we don't know what their background is. They come from all over the place. And I mean, I've got kids coming from Tijuana. They don't speak any English. They're supposed to be in American public schools. Like their lives got to be so hard. And I don't know. I mean, this is a multi-million-dollar question, but if we could solve or help the kids with their trauma or like to try to live somewhat normal lives, I mean, I'm the best example I can be to them, but you know, they struggle just getting to school. They struggle, you know, we got free lunches here. We got everything's pretty much free, free Chromebook, free books, free everything. You just got to get yourself to school. But even that is difficult. You know, and we're in kind of a good area here. I'm in San Clemente, Mission Viejo High School is where I work. You know, it was a middle class area. It's kind of going down now, but gosh, I'm sure Denver, I'm sure you're experiencing it all over the place. I don't know what the answer is, but it's really sad, really sad.
And you're seeing that on a daily basis. So you're seeing it happening before your eyes. But then what happens when they do exit the school system and now they're young adults and they're entering the workforce and they are still living with the long-term effects of that. And this is harsh to say, but it can be easier to see it with kids because they just kind of live the way they are, right? They're true to themselves. They just, what you see is what you get with a lot of kids. And then as we mature and as we get older, we learn to conceal or to perform in certain situations. So it's less evident. And so part of what I want to just impress upon all of you is, what about the people that you're working with? Or what about your neighborhood? You know, what, even beyond just the younger generation, what are people living with currently? And those are the people that usually might end up homeless or are more likely to end up unhoused. And that's what we're going to get into. So perfect segue, thank you. But that's a little bit about what we want to talk about is what happens when they are homeless and what are the types of homelessness, because not all unhoused persons are equal. We see some living on the street in downtown, and we see some camping out under the freeway. And then we see shelters for individuals who are trying to leave their home because of abuse situations. So there are even different types of homelessness, different cases, and there's different types of assistance. So we're going to just look at 3 of those in kind of the immediate emergency shelter. Short-term homelessness usually comes as a result of perhaps job loss. So they suddenly get laid off and it's the end of the month and they're not able to pay their rent bill, or unsafe living conditions. Maybe the water got shut off and the house got condemned or something along those lines. And people need to leave their home quickly and find another place to stay pretty quickly. So that's an emergency situation. The second phase is more of an interim or transitional. They're moving from emergency to hopefully something a little more permanent. But that might be something that results out of a family conflict. That's kind of typical when we see younger people who are unhoused. They've left their parents' home perhaps because of a family conflict. Or it might be the result of domestic violence where one of the parents decides to leave or leave with children. Or it could be due to recent incarceration. So when they exit the justice system, they're put into kind of transitional housing. But the goal is always to move towards long-term permanent housing. But when we see people who are long-term permanent homeless, not permanent hopefully, but long-term homelessness, it is often tied to deeper rooted issues like substance abuse or perhaps mental illness. And some of those might have initiated with the emergency shelter. They might have had to leave their home, whether of their own choosing because it was no longer a great place for them, or against their choosing. Maybe they got kicked out of their house or there was domestic violence. So they leave the home out of an emergency situation, but it becomes exacerbated and then they become subjects of long-term homelessness. And there are many reasons. This isn't intended to be like, oh, these are the only reasons, but this just gives us some idea that the issue is much more complex than just, oh, we got to solve the homeless problem. But speaking of that, what do you guys think? Is the homeless crisis in the US in general, like if you just had 2 broad strokes, is it getting better So is homelessness decreasing or is it getting worse? Are we seeing more people move into homelessness? So go ahead and use your chat. There you go. Or hit your
Sorry.
That's okay. Hit your space bar and let me know. Is it, Peter says absolutely worse. You're pretty convinced. Okay.
Worse.
Worse.
So it seems like we have a pretty good consensus. Anybody think it's getting better? Anybody want to be, ooh, Kwame, she's being bold. Yeah. So let's look at
Come
this.
to California if you want to see it. It's
Kwame's in
awful out
California.
here.
Yeah.
Oh,
for
good
sure.
Lord. San Diego and LA is terrible.
Yeah.
Same. I'm in downtown Denver.
Yep. And a lot of it can be, our perception can be skewed by where we are. But the fact is, across the country, these numbers are from the 2022 Annual Homelessness Assessment Report to Congress. And if you look at each of these lines, each one of them has a downward trend. This is 5 years worth of data. This is an official report that goes to our government. And even though, you see on the green line, it dips and it goes back up again, but overall, over the last 5 years, homelessness is getting better. We are seeing less people becoming homeless and remaining homeless. And just for interest, you will have access to this when I send out the slides, but the gray line is individuals who are homeless but sheltered. So they might be in shelters, and then the green line is individuals who are unsheltered, meaning they're living on the streets or camping out in the woods or whatever that might be. So the fact is, overall trends is that homelessness is decreasing, meaning it is getting better in the United States. Now, a couple of key points, those are out of order, so let's pull them all up. A couple of key things. There was only a 0.3% increase in the number of people experiencing homelessness in the United States from 2020 to 2022. So in that 2-year span. And there was a decrease in homelessness among veterans and families and youth. And if I remember correctly, youth in this study was defined up to age 25. So those people groups, which we often assume veterans, that's a large population of the homeless. That's what we see in movies, right? But veterans are improving. The situation with homelessness for veterans is improving, and families and youth. But there has been an increase in homelessness for individuals who have disabilities, and they end up experiencing long-term homelessness, and people living on the street who are unsheltered. Again, that's a long-term homelessness issue. Now, several of you said California. So here is a few more statistics from that study, or a few things that we can learn. Long-term or permanent housing is getting better, meaning more people are moving from emergency to transitional to permanent housing. And that has to do with things like Habitat for Humanity, or this other, or ICU. Is that what it was called, Debbie? ICU, that organization. And Brad's going to tell us about another organization. So all of those types of things are helping people get into a home situation and stay there. The short term, the emergency shelter, that is getting worse. That is where we are seeing more people having to leave home, whether of their choosing or not, but having to leave home suddenly. So they are all of a sudden in an unhoused situation. And like you all said, in California, which is where most of us are, it is increasing drastically. So I don't know, Peter, if you were saying California as well, but you're in terms of absolutely worse when it comes to California, you're correct. And the sad thing is that other states are making progress. So it is possible to do something about it. And other states are getting better, improving statistics on homelessness. California is still dragging behind. So we have some work to do.
Keem, do you know why? Like, what do they say is contributing to that for California specifically?
That's a really good question, and I don't have the answer for you. The link for that study will be I have it linked in the slide here. And they have some good, that graph was from one of the pages. So they did I think it's about 22 pages, but they did a good job of making it understandable kind of for, well, you live in that space a little more than I do. But it's certainly interesting. And another thing that I'm going to share is a YouTube video about homelessness. So a news report, and they talk a little bit about it as well. Yeah, a good question.
Do you think anything has to do with when COVID hit and, landlords weren't allowed to do any evictions? And then I think that there was something along those lines here in Denver.
Mhm.
And all of a sudden there was this kind of mass evictions that were going on. Do you think that that is a contributor maybe?
That could be. That's a really good thought, because you're right. There was a freeze on being able, if people weren't able to pay their rent, landlords were not allowed to evict people from their home during COVID. That was one of the things that came out of COVID. So you're saying that after COVID ended and that regulation was lifted, maybe there were mass evictions. I'm not sure about that. Last time I renewed my renter's lease, that law was still in effect. I haven't checked recently. Maybe someone else knows. But in terms of, those years that they listed, 2020 to 2022, that was during COVID and after. So Peter says, in general, it's mainly because of the cost of housing has skyrocketed, which is another very valid thing. And probably what we could pull from this conversation is there are a lot of contributors. It's not just one thing or another. There are a lot of factors, but those are all important. And it's important to address all of them, at least in some way. There isn't a single solution that's going to fix it all, because there isn't a single problem that's contributing to it all. Right?
Right. It'd be great if it was that simple, but I think that's interesting that that's what we're coming to, because at least for California and Denver, like housing costs are astronomical. They have
Mhm.
like percent, right? And so the fact that those of you guys from California and those of us from Denver saying, absolutely, it's gotten worse because we see it.
Right.
We also can point to housing costs have they're crazy. I mean,
Yeah.
my property taxes were almost $6,000 this year.
And going back to the issue of long-term homelessness, though, usually it's not assumed that finances are the main contributing factor to someone not being able to get back into long-term housing. And there are programs and there are organizations like the ones you guys all brought to our attention that are helping people with that and supporting them along the way. But there's another group of individuals that if they are in long-term unhoused situations, it's usually tied to some other issues that are related to trauma. And that's not a financial situation. It could be a contribution because they might have a harder time making a living, for sure, but it's not the finances isn't the only contributor there. Dan, you want to add something?
Well, one of the, COVID was a problem, but I just heard the last week in New York, the courts have decided that the tenants can decide if they want to move out or not move out of units, and which is nice. It makes it, for those tenants, it makes it probably okay. The problem is when you do that, then you kill anybody that wants to ever be a landlord in New York. And so you can have a little bit of a short-term fix, but you're just asking for long-term problems. The other thing is we did a trip to Red Bluff, California 2 years ago, or maybe it was 3 years ago. And we studied kind of the homeless thing from a small community look at things. And it's obviously a little bit easier in a smaller community because you can have the police department and you can have the city council, the Chamber of Commerce. Even in the homeless groups, they take on a little bit of a government. Let's say there's a mayor of a homeless. When there's a group, there's always a mayor and a assistant mayor and a city council, kind of. And so they were kind of looking at ways to work together, even working with the homeless groups, because some of the things they run into is like they might get a grant. They had a ramp into the water or the big river up there for recreation. And so they got a grant from the federal government, I think it was. And then all the homeless people moved in there. And so what happens is the federal government quits giving you grants as a community, because they go, well, if we give you a grant and this is what happens, we're not going to give you any more grants. And so they worked with the homeless to move them into a little bit of a remoter area to try to fix the problem. But I realized that Red Bluff is a lot different than San Francisco and Los Angeles because of just the volume of people. And it's just one of the overwhelming problems in our world. And I put it to you this way. I'm kind of an advocate for giving university in our company Power Plus. And so I'll do some 6 a.m. meetings with guys that work the field and installers. And of course, everybody grumbles about homelessness. And I say, well, listen, I have some good news for you this morning. You can make $1,000 difference in homelessness by going to GU, getting your $1,000 grant and giving it to somebody that works with the homeless people. And I said, it's not going to fix the whole problem. It's not even close, but at least you can do your part because it's an overwhelming, it's overwhelming.
Mm-hmm.
But there's no easy answers. I do think the government or politics has some things to do with it. And, it's
well,
not,
and that's what we're going to talk about next is what are some of the ways to help those people? It's such a big problem. It's a prevalent problem. It's a problem that has been long-standing, and at least in the areas where this group lives, it's getting worse. So what can be done about it? What are some of the ways to help people who are currently experiencing homelessness or are at risk of homelessness? And then whose responsibility is it? Those are kind of the next questions. And go ahead, Dan.
That's true. I don't know if there's homelessness in China, so that's one way to do it, right?
I don't know if it's doing it right. It's one way to do it.
That's one way to do it. It's
right.
Like there ain't no homeless here.
Yeah.
Anyway, keep going. I apologize for
that's okay. It's an important conversation, but you do want me to end on time, so
of course we do.
So when we talk about short-term homelessness, the emergency shelter, what's most important to help those people is to tend to their immediate needs. And those usually are food right away, shelter right away, first aid, and sometimes clothing, that kind of thing. And we see a lot of community organizations or churches or other things like that, rescue missions that help with this short-term immediate need. In the interim, for those people who've already been through the short-term process but are trying to avoid the long-term homelessness, the practical needs are super important. And that can be job training, just like, now I'm going to forget who it was, Alex, that's what you were talking about, right? The job training.
Cross-purpose, yeah.
Right. So beyond, just building the home, it's also helping them gain the job training, get into rehab, be part of a support group. And we'll talk a little bit more about why support groups are so important. But also in the long term, because their issues are different, and we're making generalizations, so it's not true of everybody, but often the long-term issues are different than the short-term causes of homelessness. And there it really needs to be about healing. We need to be talking about what are the adverse effects that they are currently living with because of trauma they experienced a long time ago. And often that needs to be in the form of providing counseling and mental health care. And then as people who have experienced trauma do get into therapy, if that's under the care of a professional, it usually means a balance between both medication and psychotherapy. It's not one or the other. It's not just medication and it's not just psychotherapy. And what's really important is that it has to happen over time. There's no quick fixes. They're not going to get into a 3-month program and be cured. It's a long-term process. And having a supportive environment is often the make it or break it factor in that long-term process. So having the job training program or having the support group, just having that group of people around them who will encourage them, support them, treat them over time, that is usually what it takes for someone to be successful and to be able to get out of the situation they're in and be successful in being rehomed. And we were talking about, well, whose responsibility is it? Whose fault is it? We started with whose fault is it, right? But then whose responsibility is it to fix it? And, you know, a little bit of our paychecks goes to government programs that are supposed to be addressing these issues. And it does help, you know, you have to at least say we're grateful to have some of those programs, but it's not enough. And it does need the support of individuals like ourselves and nonprofit organizations like the ones that you guys were presenting about to also contribute to helping people who are in those situations to be able to rise out of that. And the nonprofit organizations are super important when it comes to addressing societal and mental poverty. And that is why we want to say, that's why we're looking at them. We're asking, what are the big issues? And what are the things that draw your attention that you feel passionate about? And then how can you get involved? Because every one of those organizations, whether they're 20 million or 4 million, or maybe just 100,000, they can't do it without our support, without our donations, without our participation and volunteering. So that's part of why we're doing this course. And also, we believe, you know what, it's a collective responsibility. As a country, as a society, as a culture, we can each choose to make the world a better place to live in. We can choose to be more aware, we can choose to be more compassionate, and we can choose to be more involved in the solution. So that's part of why this group here, like, we're a collective group, and we hope that that is part of what Giving University will allow you opportunity for, so that you can have more individual participation, not only through this course and hopefully the grant that you're able to award your organization of choice, but even beyond that. So how will you choose to be generous with your time, your talent, and your treasure to address the societal and mental poverty in your own community? Because if we don't start with ourselves, it's easy to blame government, and not that we will stop blaming government, but it's important to start with ourselves and then start as a society, get involved with nonprofits, and support the work of the government whenever possible. So that's kind of what tonight's class is about. Again, I'm sorry we didn't have time to watch that video at the beginning. I highly encourage you to watch it. It's interesting and it's important. And then if it's something that you want to learn a little bit more about, here's some more resources that we recommend. You can find both of these on Amazon, either as paperbacks or audio. That seems to be what everybody does now. And this will be in the slides that you all get. Ooh, then we go to homework. We're not quite ready to switch to homework yet. So let me just take a breath and a pause. Any final thoughts on this topic? And then I'm not going to let it go too long because we do have a few more presentations that we want to honor our time and get through. Well, actually, Dan, you get the say on that. We have 7 minutes till 7 o'clock, but it's a big group. But any final thoughts? Who wants the final word? One person, final word on tonight's content. I nominate Bonnie. She's reaching for it.
Super important. Super important for all of us to be aware of this, and we all want to blame and point fingers and find out. I kind of do a thing is, if there's somebody that's really on the negative, I say, then all that time you spent on the negative, now you get 5 more minutes to talk about the positive. So I make them balance their complaining time with something positive. And I also think that that this coincides with the loneliness epidemic, that sometimes I think these homeless people, in their trauma, in their heads, they need to go out on the street and find someone that's in the street that might listen to them. For some reason, they find community on the street. It isn't always, well, some of them look really happy on the street because they have community. And we just wonder what it must be like at night or in the heat or whatever, but somehow they're getting something on the street, and that's what draws them there. Maybe.
So 2 things I heard you say is that if we're willing to address someone's loneliness and be their friend, that may go a long way with certain individuals. So that's one thing we can do immediately. And then the second thing, it was the first thing you said, and now I'm losing my train of thought. you said to balance complaining with something positive. That's a really good teacher word. I like that a lot, but that's also something that we can immediately begin to apply. So good thoughts. Thank you, Bonnie. Good.
And I'm happy to slide my presentation till next week because I know you're out of time.
Well, we have 5 minutes. So let me give you the homework really quick. And this will all be in the email. But a couple of things is over the next couple of weeks, we actually have more presentations than tonight. So we are going to ask you to plan for a bit of an extended class time. So if you are able to join at 5:15, please do that. We're going to start a little bit early. Most of you have been able to join early, so we thought that would work. And we'll plan to go to 7:15 so that we can get to the presentations. Presentation is a required part of the class, so you all do have to do it. And if you can't do it in this class, you have to find where it will work to do it with another class. So if we can get it done in this session, that's going to make it, that's the best thing for you in terms of completing the course requirements. Basically, everything is due. This will all be recapped in the email as well, but all of your things are due, all homework, the grant proposal and organizational review, Poverty Inc., don't forget about that. That is due next week. It'll be linked in today's email as well, and your presentation. And if you have any questions, please email us. Usually we stay on after the close of class for just a couple of minutes as well. So I see you guys saying you can all do your presentations pretty quickly and shortly. Are you guys wanting to do that now? Dan, is it okay if we go another 5-10 minutes? You're muted.
Yeah, the first problem is me learning how to do this. Yeah, we'll go over just a little bit tonight. The one reason you guys need to realize we have to go over a little bit is I let a lot of people in this class. Like usually it's 15 and I think we let in 25. And so that's just a little bit of what happens when you do this. But anyway, we can go quickly. Let's do 3 or 4 or whatever we can get. I think just kind of keep it short and sweet like we've been doing.
Okay, so Mr. Brad Black, you ready, sir?
Hey. All right, Bridge Bread, if you can, I don't know if you want to throw it up there or not, but it's a small potatoes operation compared to what the millions of dollars this Habitat for Humanity has. There's only like $380,000 revenue. They scored 17 out of 18, and that was only because, you know, their percentage of allocated towards the payment of the people, the living wage of their 7 full-time workers makes up a big chunk of it. Most of their money, their revenues comes from sales. They make all sweet things as far as baked goods. And it is awesome. My wife actually did this whole thing. So that was easy for me to find this organization because she did it. And I actually was down there just watching her volunteer, talking to the founder. It's basically they try to work with the homeless population. There's a case manager, like a social worker case manager. So it's not just anybody that can apply and actually become employed with Bridge Bread. And they are simply, their main goal is to make the bread. And then basically there's 1 million volunteers that are helping sell the bread at markets. There's also, they sell them to hotels, restaurants. There's 45 churches that have their baked goods for sale. So as the owner said, you can read, if you bake it, they will come. And that's exactly what they've done and done very well with. So, and they essentially, they don't actually work with the housing of the homeless. It's really all about giving them a skill and have them feel empowered then, and some stability because of the money that they're earning on the living wage, to actually then go out and get their own house. And I've noticed some of the people that have been on here tonight presenting have talked about the percentages or whatever of people that have made it through the program, or, you know, have had success and gotten up on their own 2 feet, etc. And they are approximating at about 75% of all who have come through here in the last 12 years. It's been around 12 years, have actually went on to keep a stable job and keep employment, maybe in a different, at St. Louis Bread Company, Panera Bread, baking for them, what have you. That's it.
Excellent. And they scored a 17.
Mm-hmm. Yes, I did.
Very good. Any questions? Everyone's like, nope.
I get it. I get it.
No,
I'll
it's
take your
good.
questions off air. Off air. I'll always take your questions.
That's
All
right. Good job. Okay,
you.
next we have, I know Nate is going and, oh, and Bonnie. All right, Bonnie, you ready, ma'am? You can get going while I pull it up.
All right. I live in part of California, the San Joaquin Valley. The town is Bakersfield and the county is Kern. And where I live is if you've read The Grapes of Wrath, that's where everybody went. And if you've read Kristen Hanna's book called The Four Winds, that's where everybody went. So it's kind of like America's first refugee camp, you could say, because of the Dust Bowl. And with that came really hard workers, but because they were migrant workers, they did not get the education they needed. And as many of us know, that cycle repeats itself. The people who don't get a young education become parents, and then they don't know how to educate their children or model good services. So the program that I'm going to talk about is the Kern County Literacy Council, Kern Literacy Council, and they provide volunteers that help with reading skills, and they help, the volunteers help with passing a GED, and they help with my passion, which is English as a second language. That's what I did for 17 years in Bakersfield, all day. It's at the adult school. And so I can see what it means to give people the power of being able to communicate either passively or actively. They're both important. And they've been here since, this particular organization has been here since 1966. And it's a great place. I think if I were to volunteer there, I would advocate for them to match one-on-one teaching, reading with people who are lonely. I think it's a match waiting to happen, but I'm opining right now. So that's it. They give power to people when the people learn to read, and it's one-on-one education. And 1966 is a long time to have any sort of literacy program. So I'm proud of them. My students have been part of it, and they come back quietly. They don't have to make a big fuss about it. They just say, yeah, it was good. My students would learn from me, and then they'd also double up and go to this organization. So that's where I think money would be well spent. A score of 18.
Excellent. Questions, comments, concerns?
I think that learning really good English is is in your toolbox of skills for work, is one of the most important things that you can do, especially if you're not from a non-English, a community, because it's what it actually gets you ahead. And so I think it's just really important.
Yeah, thank you.
That's a good presentation. Thank you.
Thank you.
One thing that's nice about these presentations is you see a lot of different things, that the little nuances out there that really kind of overall make a big difference.
I agree.
Well, I will add to that real quickly too, and just say literacy is a basic tool to survival, right? So just like food and water, like being able to communicate, needing something or getting something is huge. And also my best friend from college was from Bakersfield. So
We also have a Power Plus office in Bakersfield.
That must be why I know
That's your,
Warren.
and Bonnie has in her presentation, they always need more volunteers. So I think that's your calling then to head out there, Debbie. All right, Nate.
All right, let me pull it up here. So my organization is Save Our Youth, and I'll just give a quick background. So Save Our Youth next year is going to be celebrating their 30th anniversary as an organization. And the main vision and purpose of Save Our Youth is to connect youth mentees with mentors and have long-lasting relationships. So their real goal is just to see a world where every young person embraces their God-given worth and self-value. So they help do that in the Denver metro area. And just kind of an overview of the impact they're having. So they are having a really significant impact. Last year in 2022, there were 250 youth that had mentoring relationships with a mentor. The average of those relationships lasts anywhere from 3 to 4 years, 43 months on the average. And they also do events throughout the year. So there's lots of training events, lots of fun activities. They do like a back to school party in the fall. They put together a Christmas party and help the mentors and they connect the mentors with local churches and then also coordinate with the mentees' families to pick out unique Christmas gifts and then celebrate an end of year Christmas party at the end of the year. In terms of their 990 scorecard, they're 17 out of 18. The only area that wasn't the top 3 or didn't get a score of a 3 was they're spending just a little bit more in the fundraising area. So that's why it wasn't quite at an 18. And then in terms of why I selected the organization, I think youth mentorship is extremely important. I know for me, I had really good parents growing up, but I also had a lot of mentors, a lot of men and women that really influenced and impact my life just based on how they lived their lives, what they taught me, what they instructed me. And so I want to do the same thing for youth. And that's why I'm involved with Save Our Youth. And let me just keep looking here. And how I originally got connected with the organization, one of my friends, Jeff Hall, he connected me with them. He'd been serving with Save Our Youth for many years and thought it would be a good fit for me. I've always enjoyed working with youth in my local church, my community. And so it was a great way for me to have an impact on an individual and get involved and have something really structured and straightforward. So I spent a couple of years mentoring this young man named AJ. He's currently 13, and we meet up about 3 to 4 times a month and do all sorts of different fun activities. We would go to the local park, we'd go to a local nature and science museum, to the zoo. We go play putt-putt, do all sorts of different types of activities just to hang out, have fun together. But we always allowed time for more serious conversations too. And so I just wanted to be a support network, a cheerleader for whatever he was going through at school. He was in middle school, and so there's all sorts of challenges that I remembered as a kid. And so just to be, somebody to listen and encourage him has been just a super big blessing to me over time. So that's a summary of Save Our Youth. They're really good about connecting mentors with mentees with the goal of really building those long-term relationships.
Very cool. And what you're doing as a mentor there is combating that loneliness that Bonnie was referring to. So you have no idea how your influence and your time with him is helping shape him and help him be a better human in the future when we talk about these childhood traumas and those kinds of things. So it's awesome. I actually went to the website because I was like, oh, this is a cool organization. And I like the way they have the little cards of children waiting for a mentor. So that was kind of like, oh, okay, yeah. But very
I want to
cool.
say there's like 50 or 60. So if anybody's interested, there's more opportunity there.
Yeah. Awesome. Any questions
other
for
questions?
Nate or comments? Okay. Well, thank you guys for hanging out with us an extra 10 minutes. I'll stay on a little bit to see if anyone has a question about any of the assignments, any of the homework you haven't turned in, any makeup assignments, or your grant proposal. Pillsbury family, I think I wanted to talk to you guys a little bit if you're still on, but
Also,
otherwise.
Okay. Some of you I know are thinking about the Nigeria trip. There's a Nigeria trip meeting on Thursday night, I think it is, if you're interested. So if you're interested, email Beth and ask her for the Zoom link and all that. But I know there's a group of you that I don't know if you know about it or not, but anyway, just wanted to let you know.
And then speaking of Beth, if you have done your presentation and you're super satisfied with your grant packet, in my email will be the email address where you need to send your final grant package to Beth, because she's the one that distributes it to the board for review and approval. So you can either send the one that you have now, or if you want to make any adjustments, you have time to do that. It's not due till the end of our 7 weeks. But if you're done and want to be all done, you can go ahead and send it. That email will be in my summary as well. Yes, Alec.
Question on that. If for whatever reason that your grant proposal does get denied, do you have an opportunity for revisions to be made?
You will most likely, if there's missing information, which I don't think will be your case, but if there's missing information, Beth will reach back out to you and let you know, hey, you need to supply this additional or something along those lines. If your organization doesn't get approved for other reasons, then you'll have opportunity to submit a different organization. Yeah, so it's not a one and done deal. Given University wants you to be generous and wants to afford you this opportunity. They just want to make sure it's within the parameters.
And you don't have to do another presentation. The presentation you do, the quality of presentations I've seen is what is acceptable to us. If the organization isn't, you can kind of take your time and finding one. I always encourage people to make sure you find one, but we don't make you do the presentation and the complete package all over.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, you just do the paperwork, and Beth would let you know why it wasn't approved so that you can be sure to address that or
yeah, and sometimes if you give them feedback, they'll change their minds.
Okay, awesome, thank you.
One thing I didn't see a lot of you doing was putting any notes in your packet about why they scored a 16, for example. And just to clarify, they're not looking for perfect 18s. That's not the expectation. They do want 16 and above, but you have an opportunity to say, do you feel it scored fairly? Or if they received a low score, what are the reasons for that? You have space to do that. So if you want to add anything along those lines, don't miss that opportunity. Yep, good questions.
I have a really quick question too that might be stupid, but so do these organizations know that they get scored? I'm sure they do, but like, is it part of the purpose of it to be a standard of like, yo, if you're paying 4 of your employees more than $170,000 a year, like this don't look good on you?
They don't necessarily know. I mean, GU's not going to go back to them and say, oh, you scored a 16 out of 18. Now, there are some organizations that have been through the process. There are individuals who've proposed them previously. So like Dan's familiar with Cross Purpose. So very likely they've heard about this process. And actually, I've gone back to organizations and said, hey, you could do a better job on your 990. Here's a few things I learned. And whether they put it in place is up to them. But I go ahead and say it's because other people are looking for grant review and different organizations are looking for different things. So that would be more an opportunity for you to have that conversation because we're hoping that you will build that relationship with them.
So it's particularly specific to when they're looking for grant money.
And this is Giving University's process. Sure. This analysis form is from Giving University. So each organization would have its own vetting process and what they're looking for and their own requirements.
Yeah, good to know. Thank you.
Yeah.